With Daring Faith, Chapter 12, A Way of Life. The bandy that Amy and Ponnamal had to ride to get anywhere in India reminded Amy a little of the rickshaws she had used in Japan. The bandy had 4 wheels instead of 2, and a pair of oxen pulled it instead of a man, but the ride was just as bumpy and jolting, and not much faster. "Everybody, come and see!" The 2 women saw a little Indian girl run around from hut to hut in the small Hindu village. "It is truly an appalling spectacle. It is a great white man!" Amy looked around for a moment before realizing that the great white man the girl referred to was Amy herself. "She is not a man. She has on a sari. Only women wear that." "He is too a man. See, he has on a man's turban. And besides, have you ever seen a white woman?" Amy almost burst out laughing at this conversation. How she wished she didn't have to wear that silly turban, but she would faint in the heat otherwise. "You really are a woman! A white woman, wearing a turban! What an appalling spectacle!" Amy whispered to Ponnamal, "Did you know that in England they think that women missionaries over here are looked upon as divine goddesses? Just wait till I tell them that I was referred to as an appalling spectacle." Some mothers shooed their children inside at the sight of the missionary women. "Come," one mother cried at a curious boy, "do you not know that they get 100 rupees for getting one of us to follow their way? Come." "Where do they get such notions?" Amy mused in bewilderment as she climbed down from the bandy. She looked all around the little village they had come to. Apparently it was quite religious. Several stone shrines dotted the landscape around the huts, each shrine surrounded by dozens of idols. Amy was relieved when a kind woman invited them into her hut out of the heat. There the great white man removed her turban to prove once and for all that she really was a woman. As her eyes grew accustomed to the darkness, Amy saw several women sitting around on mats, some old, some young, some working at weaving, and some just sitting and chewing on something. Most of them had slickly oiled hair parted in the middle and pulled back in a knot at the nape of their neck, as was the custom of Indian women. They all wore saris, as Amy did, draped over one shoulder and pulled around the waist. A cow was settled down in the back of the hut, lazily swatting flies with its tail. "Won't you have some patel?" an Indian woman urged. Amy looked at the big leaf with nut and lime rolled up in it. She watched the other women take big bites, chew for a while, and then spit it out. They seemed to be enjoying themselves immensely. Hesitantly she took a leaf. Then she said, "Thank you so much, but it is not my country's custom to eat patel," and she returned it. The woman seemed satisfied. After chewing for a few moments longer, they began to ply her and Ponnamal with questions. "Why don't you wear jewels? Where is your family? Why have you left them all to come here?" That was Amy's opportunity. "We have come here to tell the good news of the great God who became man," she explained with animation. "He came to earth to take the penalty for our sins." For several minutes she continued to explain, while Ponnamal occasionally helped her with the difficult language. But the more Amy talked, the more discouraged she became, for the women simply stared at her. "Lord, speak to them," she prayed urgently, but all the women just continued to munch on their betel leaves and stare. Finally, one woman said, "Our husbands decide our religion for us," and that seemed to be that. Amy and Ponnamal left. One old woman followed them out of the hut. "It is a nice religion you have," she remarked, "but it is mistaken. What religion could be right that would make us break our caste? I could never leave the caste into which I was born." The woman turned and trudged back into the darkness of the hut. When they were out of sight, Amy turned to Ponnamal. "Caste, caste, that's all they live for," she cried in frustration. "Indeed, you are right," Ponnamal agreed. "All their lives revolve around caste. Many of them would rather die than break it. They must find, as I did, that Jesus was worth far more than caste." Amy's mind went back to the time when Mr. Walker was first explaining to her about caste. "It is probably our biggest hindrance to spreading the gospel here in India," he'd said. "But where in the world did such an idea come from?" Amy demanded. Mr. Walker explained in his patient way. "You have to understand the history of Hinduism to understand caste, and even then," he added thoughtfully, "even then we Europeans can never fully understand it. You know that Hinduism teaches reincarnation, just as Buddhism does." "Yes, I remember that," Amy said. "That's what makes them think that all life is equally valuable, that it's just as wrong to kill a fly as it is to kill a person, because that fly might be some dead relation." "Right, but that is only in theory, of course. In practice they kill, sometimes with no thought or compunction, and you know that the other side of the coin is that if a person suffers great hardship here on earth, they believe that it is simply his fate, that he is suffering for the sins that he committed in some past life. Yes. Well, all these heathen beliefs led to the development of the caste system. Hindus decided that some people must be better than others, with the priests or Brahmins at the top, on down through the warriors, the farmers, the merchants, and so on, down to the outcasts, who aren't even considered to be in a caste at all. If a man is born a Brahmin, then they believe he must have lived a worthy life the last time around, and if someone is born an outcast, then no one needs to feel sorry for him, because it is his own fault. He was wicked in his last life. The caste system is further complicated by the fact that these groups have been divided into hundreds and hundreds of subgroups, and most castes are never permitted to mix with any other in any way, not eating, not touching, and certainly not marrying. Well, I would think that anyone in any of the lower castes would be happy to abolish the caste system. They aren't allowed to do anything with their lives, to make anything of themselves. Well, Mr. Walker conceded, have you noticed that almost all of our converts are of the lowly caste? That is no coincidence. But still, Sister Amy, you don't see that caste is more than just a social division. It's a way of life. Even for a low caste pot maker, if he were to be saved, it is most likely that everyone in his caste would turn on him. He would be scorned forever, and no Hindu would ever buy his pots. And pottery is all he has known his entire life. His father was a potter, his grandfather was a potter. It's unthinkable for him to try to do anything else. So, when he turns his back on his caste, he turns his back on everything he has ever known in this life and faces a world full of unknowns. Amy shook her head as she thought of those words Mr. Walker had spoken some months before. She brought her mind back to the present to hear Ponnamal saying, "Shall we go in here?" "I suppose we should. You know, Ponnamal, sometimes I wonder why women don't jump at the chance to shed their chains of inferiority and slavery in Hinduism and obtain equality in Christianity. But then, other times I can see it. They'd have to give up everything." "Yes," Ponnamal answered with the knowing look of one who had experienced it. "Everything."